Good morning, students. In the last part of the previous video, we have discussed on the conservatism. We saw how the monarchical form of government was restored, and again some laws that were abolished were applied on its people. This led to the rise of some liberal nationalists. That is, the revolutionaries. The conservatists were controlling the whole of Europe. Anyone who went against them were punished. So the fear of repression made the liberal nationalists to form secret societies to train the revolutionaries and spread their ideas. Their main motive was to oppose the monarchical form of government and fight for liberty and freedom, and also to create nation-states. During the training, there were many leaders who led the group. One such strong and prominent leader was Giuseppe Mazzini. He was an Italian revolutionary who was born in Genoa in 1807. He had joined the secret society called Carbonari. At the age of 24, he was banished from Italy. Why? Because he attempted a revolution in Liguria in the year 1831. Which was against the monarchical rule. Liguria is located in northwestern part of Italy, and even after he was exiled, he did not stop. He founded two more underground societies. First, Young Italy in Marseille, that is in France, and then the second is the Young Europe in Bern, that is in Switzerland. Remember this, okay? Young Italy and Young Europe. These are important, which was founded by Giuseppe Mazzini. The members who were participating in this group had same thinking and same motive to achieve liberty and freedom. And they were young men from Poland, France, Italy, and the German states. Mazzini believed that God had intended nations to be the natural units of mankind. According to him, God made the nation to be of man's natural unit, where all mankind has natural rights instead of being ruled by one. So Italy had to be made into a single unified republic. It was his belief and his objective to achieve liberty and unification of Italy. So more of secret societies were also set up in other regions of Europe, that is in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. He was so determined and active in opposing the monarchy and to achieve his goal, that is to have a democratic republic in Italy, that it began to frighten the conservatives. And Duke Metternich, the Austrian chancellor who hosted the Congress, also described him as the most dangerous enemy of our social order. He was a big threat to them. Now comes the Age of Revolution that took place in the period 1830 to 1848. So, as conservative regimes tried to consolidate their power, liberalism and nationalism came to be increasingly associated with revolution in many regions of Europe, such as the Italian and German states, the provinces of the Ottoman Empire, Ireland, and Poland. After defeating Napoleon collectively, the conservatives tried to join their power. During that time, the liberals and the nationalists who were in for revolution kept on increasing and was spreading in many parts of Europe. Who were those liberal nationalists? They were the educated middle class elite, among whom were professors, school teachers, clerks, and members of the commercial middle classes. You must have read in class 9 also in French Revolution how the middle class emerged. So the first upheaval took place in France in July 1830. When the conservatives restored monarchy, the one that was given in charge of throne was from Bourbon dynasty. But when the upheaval took place, the revolutionaries overthrew the monarchical form of government and installed constitutional monarchy and made Louis Philippe as its head. Again, from the French Revolution, if you remember, constitutional monarchy was once accepted and adopted by Louis XVI in France until his execution, followed by Democratic Republic country, soon after which Napoleon took over and ruled as military dictator. And in the previous video also we have discussed how Napoleon was defeated and conservatism took over. So everything that was happening in France was spreading and influencing in the other region of Europe, because of which Metternich again once remarked, when France sneezes, the rest of Europe catches cold. This revolution was also called as July Revolution. Remember that it took place in 1830, okay? And it was the first revolution that took place during the Age of Revolution. And July Revolution is also known as French Revolution of 1830 or Second French Revolution. First was in the year 1789 that you have studied in class 9. The July Revolution had also influenced its neighboring region, Brussels, in its outbreak of revolution, which led to the separation of Belgium from the United Kingdoms of the Netherlands. See, from France it went to Belgium, and from Belgium it had spread to Greece. An event that mobilized nationalist feelings among the educated elite across Europe was the Greek War of Independence, also known as Greek Revolution. Greece used to be a part of Ottoman Empire since 15th century. The struggle for independence among Greek people had been sparked from the growing revolutionary nationalism in Europe. It began in 1821. They also got many supporters. They were supported by the other Greeks living in exile from many and also from many Western Europeans who had sympathies for ancient Greek culture, or even poets and artists supported them, and the English poet Lord Byron himself organized funds, and later he went to fight in the war, where he died of fever in 1824. Finally, after fighting for about a decade, it was the Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Greece as an independent nation. In this treaty, great powers like Britain, France, and Russia participated on the one hand, and on the other hand, Ottoman Empire participated. The Greek War of Independence was a successful one, where they got the independence. Next, we will discuss the romantic imagination and national feeling. We have seen how the thirst and their dream for freedom has united people to turn into revolutionists. But besides all the warfare and territorial expansion, there was also other things that developed the nationalism in them. What were those things that bonded people? It was culture, the sentiments, their ground where they belonged from. So, culture played an important role in creating the idea of the nation, that is, in the field of art and poetry, stories and music, helped express and shape nationalist feelings. Now, let us look at Romanticism. What is Romanticism? It is a cultural movement which sought to develop a particular form of nationalist sentiment. For the Romantic artists and poets, having a nationalist sentiment was different. They had different views. They criticized the glorification of reason and science and focused instead on emotions, intuition, and mystical feelings. They would rather focus and glorify mainly on the feelings, such as feeling of oneness among individuals. Their effort was to create a sense of a shared collective heritage, a common cultural past as the basis of a nation. According to a Romantic artist such as the German philosopher Johann Gottfried Herder, it was through folk songs, folk poetry, and folk dances that the true spirit of the nation was popularized. The emphasis on vernacular language and the collection of local folklore was not just to recover an ancient national spirit, but also to carry the modern nationalist message to large audiences who were mostly illiterate. Vernacular language means native language, the language that we speak in our native place where we are born. This we will find in the case of Poland. Though Poland was partitioned and it did not have independent territory, it was through music and language that national feelings were kept alive. And just as culture was a way to keep up nationalist sentiment, language also played an important role in developing nationalist sentiments. This, as an example, it can be seen after the occupation of Russia over Poland. Russian language was imposed everywhere after forcing out Polish language. From the school, Russian language was imposed everywhere after forcing out Polish language from the school. People started to protest. Even the clergy members of Poland began to use Polish language to preach, which resulted in their imprisonment by the Russian authorities as punishment. Thus, the use of Polish came to be seen as a symbol of the struggle against Russian dominance. And there was also many other problems faced by the people. This we will see in the subsection 3.2. Hunger, hardship, and popular revolt. The 1830s were years of great economic hardship in Europe. There was increase in population day by day, which also was a major cause for unemployment. Because of industrialization, small workers, especially in textile production, struggled and had a tough competition in the market. Along with that, in some regions of Europe, where the aristocracy still enjoyed power, peasants struggled under the burden of feudal dues and obligation. And there was also rise of food prices and bad harvest that had led to some serious widespread extreme poverty in towns and country. The year 1848 was one such year. Food shortages and widespread unemployment brought the population of Paris out on the roads. People began to revolt, which made Louis Philippe the king to flee from his region out of fear. There again, National Assembly proclaimed a republic, granted suffrage to all adult males above 21, and guaranteed the right to work. National workshops to provide employment were also set up. There is one example where the crowd revolts. It was in the year 1845 in a place called Silesia. Here, the weavers had led a revolt against contractors who supplied them raw material and gave them orders for finished textiles but drastically reduced their payments. This event in a Silesian village is described by the journalist Wilhelm worth. Here, the contractors ordered finished textiles from the cotton weavers. When the production was done, the contractors took an advantage of people's need for jobs, and they reduced the price of goods and also reduced the payment of their wage, which angered the weavers and they all revolted. On 2nd June at 2 p.m., the crowd of weavers reached the home of the contractors to demand higher wages, but they were treated badly. Then afterwards they became violent and began to destroy the property. They smashed the window panes, furniture, porcelain, etc. Due to this, the contractor ran away, and soon after 24 hours he came back. But he came back along with the army. There was a fight in which 11 weavers were shot. This story describes the uprising of Cilician weavers. Now let's move to our next subsection, 3.3, 1848, the revolution of the liberals. When the poor, unemployed, and the starving peasants and workers revolted in 1848, a revolution led by the educated middle classes was underway. In 1848, when France was proclaimed republic, in other parts of Europe where independent nation-states did not yet exist, such as Germany, Italy, Poland, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, men and women of the liberal middle classes combined their demands for constitutionalism with national unification. They took advantage of the situation and pushed their demands for the creation of a nation-state on parliamentary principles. That is, 3 parliamentary principles: a constitution, freedom of the press, and freedom of association. In the German region, the political associations whose members were from middle class came together in the city of Frankfurt and decided to vote for an all-German National Assembly. And on 18th May 1848, 831 elected representatives marched in a festive procession to take their places in the Frankfurt Parliament convened in the Church of St. Paul. This is the Church of St. Paul. They drafted a constitution for German nation to be headed by a monarchy subject to a parliament. But then King of Prussia, Frederick Wilhelm IV, rejected it and joined other monarchs to oppose the elected assembly. The parliament was eroded, and as the middle class dominated parliament, who resisted the demands of workers and artisans and consequently lost their support. In the end, troops were called in and the assembly was forced to disperse. The issue of women's political rights was also in controversy, which they had been fighting over for many years. They had been forming their own political associations, founded newspapers, and taken part in political meetings and demonstrations. Even after doing so much, they were still not granted rights. When the Frankfurt Parliament convened in the Church of St. Paul, women were admitted only as observers to stand in the visitors' gallery. After those events and incidents, the conservatives were able to suppress liberal movements in 1848, but they could not ignore the old one. So there were certain outcomes, and what were those outcomes? Monarchs began to realize that continuous revolution and repression could be ended by granting some concession and agreeing on some terms to the liberal nationalist revolutionaries. Hence, after 1848, the autocratic monarchies of Central and Eastern Europe, they began to introduce the changes that had already taken place in Western Europe before 1815. Thus, serfdom and bonded labor were abolished, both in the Habsburg dominions and in Russia. The Habsburg rulers granted more autonomy to the Hungarians in 1867. So, In this video we will stop here, and in the next video we will continue with the next section, which will be the making of Germany and Italy.